Hello, and welcome back to another episode here at the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith has spoken on the message boards, joined by the best host that money can buy, but which we just don't possess. Will Masisak, you know him as Bradshaw to Ben.
I can be rented, however.
Yeah, oh, okay. Good to know. Good to know.
Long-term lease, even, not a problem. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, uh, mentioning just kind of good fortune, Steelers won a game without George Pickens, which was kind of our worst fear. Leading up to the game, like an hour beforehand, we all got the notification George Pickens would not be playing. And of course, then I immediately rushed to my fantasy football rosters and had to replace him. But, then I was like, oh boy, I don't know. Can the offense move the ball without, our number one threat on offense? And funny enough, they found a way to move it.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually. I mean, we did put 27 points up, even though, funny enough, you were correct. You barely got that under projection, but you got it, sir.
Yeah. It was scary for a second there. Yeah. Like it always is. Betting the under is super scary. Betting the over, like you have optimism to the end.
Yeah, it's like,
That's
oh,
just
there could
betting the
always
under, you know.
exactly. There could always be a surprise. Well, no surprise onside kick anymore, but always, oh, hey, last lateral ditch effort to punch a score in the end zone that you weren't expecting,
Exactly.
something like that. It's
Random.
funny because that play is now the lament and torture of any fantasy football player out there because they'll get credited with a fumble that they should have never been credited with.
Yeah. So it goes. And by the way, you're playing Jameis Winston. He could throw you a pick six in the last second.
Oh, true.
So you never know.
True. We weren't that quite that fortunate, but we did manage to pick good old Jameis off twice. So it was good to see. Really, two remarkable plays, honestly. First one being Keanu Benton. Boy, what a read for him to realize that that was a screen pass and for him to get back in the passing window.
Mhm.
Um, Probably one of the loudest points I've been all year watching this team because it's like, oh, big man score. And of course, he didn't go very far, but that's not the point. And then James Pierre with a nice interception on the overthrow late in the game to really ice it. So it's nice to see some younger guys step up. I know Pierre's not exactly a young guy anymore, but maybe an unheralded guy. Yeah, we can
Mhm.
leave it at that. But just really good effort all around from this team. It was like a total team victory. We even got that, muffed punt at the end of the game. Ben Skoranek jumped on that to really end all hope for Cleveland. So just kind of a good all around win. Offense, defense, special teams, they all contributed.
Yeah. Well, if you listened to the podcast last week, I was like, the two quarterbacks threw for like 1,000 yards the week before. So of course it's going to be kind of tighter in the beginning of this game. And the main difference between these two teams, really, and I think it's still a significant difference anyway, if not the main difference, is the field goal kicking. I mean, the special teams for the Steelers was very good, in this game, and the Browns' special teams was not very good, and that was a huge difference because if you give Cleveland those two field goals that were very makeable field goals, then it seems like a much tighter game going into the middle of the third quarter. So, it might not have been quite as easy to knock them out of get them to the point where they pretty much folded. So I thought that was great. The thing about these unheralded players contributing, it's very much like your third and fourth line in hockey, if you're a hockey fan, providing some scoring because or defenseman scoring or something. So that's Van Jefferson with a touchdown and the aforementioned, Ben Skoranek making a play and Keanu Benton who's done well and maybe a slightly more higher profile, and then James Pierre with an interception. So it really was a lot of unheralded guys making plays, and that turned out to be the difference in the game. So it's a game that they really had to win to keep the end of the season from getting like really interesting and scary.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just sort of like, going to be tooth and nail to the finish line, but it's not quite as frightening for the like. There seems to be far less of a chance of the Steelers not making the playoffs. There's still if they were to really, struggle the next few weeks to find a win somewhere, then it could come down to the last week. But I don't really think at this point the Steelers are like almost a lock for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I know we're getting down the road or whatever, but if they were to beat Baltimore a second time, that would clinch the division. and likely the number 3 seed. So that's a big deal, but I know that's down the road, but that's a big deal. Always winning the AFC North is tough as nails. Who would have thought at this point in the year we'd be the only one with a good kicking unit? But I'll take it.
It's amazing actually how that's become a storyline in the division.
Yeah.
It mattered to get the division games against Baltimore and Cleveland, and also I think in Cincinnati it was a missed field goal the other way. So
yeah,
it's like we'll take it, right? Those are sort of hidden advantages that most people are like, oh, it's this defense and this quarterback and this wide receiver, whatever. But yeah, special teams can make a big difference, especially in tight games, which not only are the division games everywhere usually tighter, but particularly the Steelers when they play in division like to make it a tight game, I think, in a way. So
yeah. Our resident special teams expert couldn't be with us here tonight, but it's a unit that when it's normally talked about, it's not a good thing. But when you're not hearing about it is when normally everything's firing on all cylinders. However, I will make a stump right now, and I know it's not near as relevant now because it's become, well, it's a complete and utter joke. But if Chris Boswell does not get AFC Pro Bowl Kicker of the Year, or in general, like if he doesn't, if there's a way he doesn't make the roster, I give up. Like there's nothing you can say to me that makes that relevant at all, and that'll be like the last straw because he's missed, I think, 2 field goals all year. One was like a 62-yarder very early in the year with, like to end a half, where we knew it was like, whatever, let's just go ahead and kick it. We're not making it on a normal play. And then I think he missed one other, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's missed 2 on year, but that's it. He's made like 35 of 37. That's ridiculous, folks.
I'll go further than that. I think Chris Boswell is the Steelers MVP so far this year.
Oh,
yeah. I think you could make a case for some other guys, but honestly, I think he's made the biggest difference on the team. They have been, they have had games where each side of the football played well, and maybe other games where one side of the football didn't play well, so on and so forth. But like Boswell kind of carried him through, especially the early part of the season. I don't think they're sitting in a position. I think they're probably more like in a position where they're fighting for a playoff, to be in playoff contention rather than leading the division by a couple games. That's how much of a difference that I think his play made, especially in that first 5 or 6 games of the season.
Yeah, it pisses me off. I should have had this stat ready, and I'm not sure I'll find it here or whatever, but Chris Boswell is like perfect in Heinz Field, like outside of one kick or something.
Yeah.
The rest of the league, I can't remember where I saw it, but the rest of the league is something like 8 of 18 or something like that. Like it's not even a 50% margin. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, that tells you how tough it is to kick in Pittsburgh. And the fact that the kicker that is in Pittsburgh hasn't missed, has maybe missed 1 in all of his attempts this year. That just tells you how good of a kicker Chris Boswell.
Pretty good. Yeah.
So my apologies.
I don't that's the way that the Steelers desire to play football, and that the kind of the let's not make any mistakes and let's wait for the other team to make mistakes. Having a solid field goal kicker and punter this season have been arguably the biggest difference in a way in several of the games, and also even just improving the punting unit, I think has really made a significant difference this year.
And it's not even the big free agent acquisition punter that we signed to begin the year. It's Corliss Wakeman, makes you wonder. It's like, man, why did we go spend money on, I can't even remember his name. That's how bad it is. It's like Corliss Wakeman has been great outside of I think there's been like 2 punts all year where I'm like, yeah, he shanked that one or something. That's killing me. I can't remember the name of the punter.
Cameron Johnston.
Yeah, Cameron Johnston. Thank you.
He did that without looking it up.
Oh, well, that's impressive.
For someone as old as I am, it really is.
But I mean, that just goes to show you how good, the most unheralded unit on the team is this year. That you had to sign a punter off the street because your starting punter tore his ACL in the first game of the year, and to the unknowing fan, you'd never even know. You'd never know. They'd be like, yeah, it's just Pittsburgh, they play well,
I think people go to like the television, I mean, to the refrigerator or, to grab a beer or whatever when the punting unit's on the field, honestly. Like, I think most people don't even, especially in the kickoffs now, it's the same thing. It's like, I bet there's a lot of people that don't even watch kickoffs anymore.
Yeah.
I know what I'm watching. If I'm trying to watch through other games and I just zip most of the time through the kickoff. If I find out something happened on the kickoff, that I might rewind a little bit, but that's how bad they've made kickoffs in the NFL. It's just,
Right.
it's not even worth watching. Uh,
Even though even though I've been giving special teams a lot of props, there's one thing that I have noticed, which seems like over the last two games, it does feel like our coverage units have lapsed a little bit. I don't know because if it's late in the year, but we've given up some like better kickoff returns. Not so much punting. I haven't noticed as much there, but like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I can't remember how far it is going back. I've thought, damn, they just let off a good sized kick return. Normally, I say anything at the 30 or less, I don't care. It's like it is what it is, not a big deal. That's what you are like come to expect anymore. But there's been a few returns that have definitely flipped the field where it's like, well, shit, guys, you just spotted them an extra 15 to 20 yards. And it's like, I know our defense is decent, don't get me wrong. And around the NFL, everyone thinks they're great, but it's like, we don't need to spot that. So I hope that's something that they kind of noticed and like we need to tighten that up.
yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if at least some of it is the late in the year thing. I'm sure that very few guys in the league are playing at 100%. And so in a way, especially speed, if you get somebody like a kickoff returner that's fresher, that's just to come off of IR or was elevated from the practice squad. Like I think last week it was the guy elevated from the practice squad. That guy's just by nature fresher and it might make something of a difference. I don't know. I also feel like there's a random element to kickoff and punt returns, where it's just somebody fell down, there was a mistake, there was a hold that didn't get called. One guy just missed that doesn't usually miss, and that's all it takes sometimes at that point of attack. So I think it's obviously all of those things you evaluate and you look at it. I haven't looked at it closely enough to be able to give you an opinion about it, but I think I think there's mostly it's just you just got to be a little bit better than the other team on your special teams coverage. I don't know if they're notably worse, overall. They just just been a couple of places where they need to clean it up, right? Rather than there's a problem that has to be fixed.
Right.
I
Well, it's
think I don't know. It could be just because we're talking about them this week. It just makes would make in the past every time we spent a lot of time talking about special teams on the show, that the next week they go out and like they lay an egg. So and it is Philadelphia where strange things happen.
yeah.
I don't want to
But
jinx
before we get to that, it's funny, we're like 15 minutes in here. We haven't even mentioned the offense or defense really. So
it. Let's go.
yeah, it's a SteelerFury.com show, and we haven't even mentioned the other two units of the team, and we've solely focused on special teams so far. But
They've been great. So yeah.
yeah, but well, let's start with the offense kind of out of this game. I think Jalen Warren is starting to really pop off. He seems like noticeably more explosive when he's in there versus Najee. And I know Najee's like the number one technically, but we really need to start playing Jalen more. We need to start featuring him more in the passing game. I'll talk a little bit more about that here when we get into matchups with the Eagles as well. But he seems like he is playing his best football right now, and I think we need to find more ways to get him the ball. It's really been nice to see Pat Fryermuth start to earn his paycheck. He's caught 2 touchdowns last 2 weeks. I know. I need to stop it with the paycheck thing because we're paying him no matter what. It doesn't really matter. But it's been nice to see him contribute. Calvin Austin has stepped up when we needed to. Hell, like you said, Van Jefferson chipping in with a touchdown. Mike Williams finally getting a few balls. It only took an injury to George Pickens for us to try to throw him the ball. But still the physical specimen that he is kind of got flagged for a bullshit PI call in this past game. I'll admit it. I didn't think it was that bad considering what receivers are allowed to do in the league anymore when trying to catch the ball. But what are your thoughts on how the offense looked against Cleveland?
Well, first of all, I want to give props to the play call that Van Jefferson had the touchdown on. It was a little sort of like half roll, and then
Mm-hmm.
quarterback kind of waits for the defense to commit to somebody and then, has three options. I love that in the red zone, especially with the guy with some mobility. Maybe Russ Wilson didn't have that mobility earlier in the year, but I felt that that was a really nice little play call. I don't often think that the play calls per se are really the thing, or like the play designs are really the strength of the Arthur Smith offense. I think it's mostly just, they've repped a real, a real committed run game, and they've repped it throughout the whole all the camps and all the way to now. And you're seeing some of the benefits of like a really organized run game, and high volume run, like they run it a lot, therefore they could get a lot of repetition doing it. I'm not sure that's the formula to win the Super Bowl, but they do it well, right? And it's worked out, and it's created some space for their receivers, and like so I understand they're at least they're accomplishing what it is they're trying to accomplish, much better the last couple of weeks. And this was in a way, the second half of this game was a little bit more impressive even than the previous week where they put up all the points, just because it was like they didn't have Pickens and they managed some way to like not just 3 and 4 yard dink and dunk down the field, even though that's like that's the thing. It's like that's what they mostly like to do, and they were able to get some more out of it than that this week. So I thought that was great. I don't know, the second and third receivers. I'm not sure they really ended up like impressing me a lot in this game and making me think, oh yeah, we're fine. We even without Pickens, we'll be good. I think it worked out this week, but I'm not necessarily. I don't think I would go into like I won't go into this week necessarily feeling as good about their situation, even though they played well enough last week.
I'm about to say the real litmus test comes this week against a much better Philadelphia secondary. But you make a good point. Russell Wilson is playing just really good football right now.
He's solid, the perfect quarterback for what they want to do.
Yeah, he really is. But like you said, that little half roll touchdown to Van Jefferson was a nice new little wrinkle. It's like, man, why haven't we done that? More often. It's like I know Fields is the better athlete at quarterback, but let's stop acting like Russell Wilson can't do some of those things as well. You saw multiple times in this game where Russell Wilson had to use his feet to either find an open pass or just get the ball out or just evade pressure. So it's like let's not just like wait until we absolutely have to break that stuff out, Arthur. It's too bad now too, because Arthur, I hear you're stuck in Pittsburgh because there's another NFL coach that got the North Carolina job. Still shocked if that's truly what the North Carolina Tar Heels end up doing, hiring Bill Belichick. That will still just blow my mind. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But I thought what was really awesome was the defense. You could tell Highsmith was fresh. He was back, to playing his energetic style of football. Able to get all four pass rushers on the field at once. Cameron Hayward, looked very good too. I won't say he's found the fountain of youth or whatever, but he's definitely redeemed his play from last year. I know he's battling that injury, but he still looks like he can play. I don't know for how much longer, but he's still showing effort and producing too. So got to give him credit there. Our secondary did a pretty good job. We did give up the one touchdown pass to Jerry Jeudy, but honestly, I thought it was just a great play on his part, keeping that play alive for excuse me, Jameis Winston. Need to take a drink here or something. But that was just a nice play, and Judy's been their big play guy ever since they traded Cooper away to Buffalo. So overall, I thought the defense played pretty well. You have anything you want to chip in there?
I mean, they once again they did what they had to do in this game. I think it's like in general, it was like they needed to find a way to win the game, and I think their goal of trying not to turn the ball over, they almost successfully did that. But I think from their standpoint, against an opponent like Cleveland, they just don't want to give up big. They don't want to give up big plays. They want to try to let the other team make some mistakes. Try not to make as many mistakes on your own, and they accomplished all of that. And then, on top of that, I thought Russell Wilson made a couple of great throws down the seam, in the middle of the field that has been missing from this offense for several years. So even just making a couple of those a game has really elevated, their ability to score points and let's put it this way, make that key drive in the second half of the game, middle of the third, fourth quarter, somewhere in there. That makes the difference in close games. So that to me, everybody wants to degrade quarterback wins as a stat. They're like, quarterback wins are not a stat. Well, to me, that's the quarterback's main job, especially when you are a fan of a team like the Steelers who don't just let the quarterback rip it, every play. They're not, the San Diego Chargers of Dan Fouts era where, or Dan Marino of Miami era where those guys, what they were being asked to do was completely different. They wanted to try to beat teams by racking up passing yardage and just attacking them downfield, attacking. And since, we watch a team where the quarterback not only is not asked to do that, he's specifically prohibited from doing that, especially on early downs where there's easy yardage to be had and so on. So I think, you can see it. It's like this couple of key plays in every game that determine winning or losing when you're playing close games. And it feels like that's the biggest difference between, not only from Justin Fields, but especially from last year, the player who should not be named, we might see this week. And I feel like that's the difference between being 9-3 and being 7-4 or 7-5 or 6-6 at this point, is just those couple of plays. And that's just, elevated quarterback play is a huge difference in this team from last year.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely can't fault that. There is one thing I will fault, that we just need to end this now. Can we stop playing Cordero Patterson?
Oh, I don't know. Go ahead. You can rant about it if you want.
I'm not going to rant about it, but I would just much rather see Jaylen Warren out there than Cordero Patterson at this point, because he looks. There was kind of a storyline this offseason that, he didn't show up in camp at the best shape. It still doesn't look like he's in that great of shape. I don't know. He's lost his explosivity factor. What made him special in the past, it doesn't look like it's there this year. And it just feels like we're just throwing him out there to throw him out there. It's like the ball is supposed to go to Patterson. And then when it does go to him, he's not making the plays that that he's made before. So to me, it's just can we stop with the charade? If we need Cordero Patterson, we can fall back to Cordero.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need to have him in the game every week.
I mean, let's put it this way. I do think it's a usage problem, but if you make it Jaylen Warren versus Cordero Patterson, then I'm inclined to agree that I would like to see Warren more. I think the real problem is they're starting Najee Harris every week, and it's the formula's working for them because they're winning. But I'm still sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop where we have a game where Najee Harris hits a brick wall and doesn't really offer much in the early part of the game. Whereas if you had Jaylen Warren in there, he might, dice them up a little bit differently. But as far as Patterson is concerned, I feel like it's just forced. The thing is, because of the way that they're using him, they ended up bringing him in late in the game in a situation where that's not really his situation. His situation is when it's earlier in the game and you're not really sure what the offense is going to do and has an element of unpredictability to it. That makes more sense to me. But they still have a very traditional outlook for how to spread out the quarterback or the running back touches, right? So I think it's just they have this, Najee's the one, and then Harris comes in for a series, and then Najee's the one, and then Jaylen Warren comes in for a series, and then it's Najee the rest of the way, and then they'll sprinkle in, Cordero Patterson and Warren later in the game, depending on what they think is, they want to do, etc. Yeah, I think, Najee Harris is accumulating statistics, and there's certain things that he's done really, he's showed a lot of energy compared to where he had been the last couple of years. He's not played poorly. He's just limited in what he is, So, I think it's against the last couple of weeks of defenses, the way that they play the run, he works great as far as, exploding when he gets up to speed and falling forward and running over guys or whatever. Like, yeah. So I'm not gonna say he hasn't played okay, but I agree with you. I'd like to find a way to to lean on Jalen Warren a little bit more because I think he is a sort of in a way a better. I feel like you're more likely to score points when Jalen Warren is on the field than you are when Najee Harris is on the field, except for in a real narrow situational football.
Yeah, I mean it's a real minor nitpick. I get that, and honestly, it does. My nitpick wasn't even that he fumbled. It's just his usage and I think ability overall. It's like the fumble at that point in the game. Yeah, it wasn't great, but it's like people fumble. I get it, but yeah, that part of it was not part of my complaint. It's more just I feel like Jalen Warren deserves those touches.
Yeah.
So
Well, listen, I'm all for guys like Warren getting more touches, but to me, the crime is that Darnell Washington doesn't get any touches. I mean, it's like I'm not really sure. Not only to reward the guy a little bit for what he's doing as a blocker, which is like at a very very high level in the league. Like if the league gave out some kind of award like best blocking tight end, I think he'd have a pretty good shot at it. Of course, as we know, nobody really cares about that. But that not only is a reward for what he's doing, but actually been really effective, and it just feels like they still have a little bit of like a checkbox. And once they've checked off that one time looking at Darnell Washington to throw it to him, whether it works or not, then they sort of move on. So I feel like this is the last couple of weeks is not really the time to judge because stuff has worked that some of it worked because they were good play calls, some of it worked because players made really good plays, and some of it worked because the defenses were just not really playing that well. Missing Cleveland, missing JOK is a huge deal for them in terms of coverage and stuff in the middle of the field, like against tight ends. And Cincinnati's pass defense is beyond horrible. So like that, we're nitpicking because they scored points and they won, and all that stuff is great. But just looking forward to the next 3 weeks, it'll be interesting to see, the things that have looked good the last couple of weeks to see if they'll work in these next 3 games.
yeah, and mentioning those next 3 games, first one on our 10-day slate from hell, aka the NFL League Office. The battle for the Keystone State takes focus in that first gauntlet of games. Steelers are traveling to Philadelphia, where they have not won since 1965.
I was alive for that, just for the record.
Say
I don't remember it, of course. I'm just only 2, or maybe even less than 2. So yeah, I don't really remember it. But yeah, I mean, who knows how much of that really matters for a group of people that don't really know anything about that experience. Only some of the coaches on this team have been the ones that were there the last time and lost. So it's not exactly like in the DNA of the players on the team, but there does seem to be something about it. I think part of that is just it's a tough place to play. And in recent years, they've been a pretty good team. And they're a little bit like the Steelers. They're a team that's tough if you don't play them all the time. They have a slightly different style on defense and offense than most teams do in the league. So I feel like that's an element of it that provides a challenge for teams coming in there. Also, I mean, I just think in some ways they're not the easiest matchup for the Steelers. So it makes it a particularly interesting game. But can I just talk about the first thing though? I said this. I said this maybe just after the game on Sunday. It occurred to me that with the results, or for the rest of the league, that essentially this game against Philadelphia is probably the least important game the Steelers play the rest of the season. It's a game that the damage from losing it would be less than the damage from losing almost any other game.
Mm-hmm.
So, from that standpoint, this would be the time if George Pickens is not 100% healthy, they're probably not going to play him. They might keep things slightly more under wraps in this game. Not to say that they won't try to win, but I have a feeling that maybe they're not going to come out of the tunnel like they're ready to kill somebody, and eat raw meat and all that stuff. That would be my guess. My guess is that they're going to show up and be professional, but they're not going to be fazed by however this game goes because it's not going to define their season, right? And I feel like the Steelers, I think I said this, I said this maybe just after the game on Sunday. It occurred to me that with the results, or it occurred to me that this game against Philadelphia is probably the least important game the Steelers play the rest of the season. they live on the edge of that motivation and that energy that this is, life or death. And that's when they play their best football. And when it doesn't feel like that, we get a sort of like a, flat stinker. So I'm leaning to this being sort of more of a flat stinker.
All right. Well, since you brought up George Pickens, it's worth going over the injury report here real quick. Obviously, he did not play this past Sunday due to a hamstring. He did not practice today with that same hamstring. So, unfortunately, it looks like we'll probably be without George. They did diagnose it as, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a grade 2 hammy. So, not exactly sure, but I think they said, ideally 2 or 3 weeks of rest before he's really back to running where he needs to run. So it wouldn't surprise me if he misses this game and the next, potentially, because we're in that weird 10-game stretch where, we have short practice weeks after this game too. So the two other injuries of note, Deshaun Elliott did not practice with a hamstring today.
Oh, that's very bad. He's been
Yeah,
arguably their best player in the secondary.
Yeah. And then Larry Ogunjobi also did not practice with a groin today. Both of them did play this past Sunday, so it's early in the week. You don't know how severe those are. Wednesday is typically the day of rest when it comes to Mike Tomlin, not Sunday. As 8 or 9 Steelers were on do not practice with veteran rest days today. I don't feel like listing them all off. Of interest, Montravius Adams, who is in his 21-day period to be activated back to the roster, did go through a full practice. So it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers have a decision there and see if they want to elevate him or maybe he just needs a little bit more time. Another weird one, and someone we probably did not expect to even hit our radar this year. Believe it or not, according to Jerry Dulac, Cole Holcomb is actually very close to returning too.
Yeah, I saw that. I
It'd
mean,
be interesting to see, whether, he can really play up to the level that we would need him to. But I will say this, and the article made a very good point. Fresh legs at this point in the year are extremely underrated. So if he can come back and just spell the inside linebacker group or just help out in packages, special teams, that may be his first avenue back to
yep.
cracking the game day roster and making plays. That would actually be a great place for him to start, obviously, because we're pretty well cemented in our rotation at this point.
Yeah.
But
You,
go ahead.
it's funny. Last year they lost, linebacker after linebacker as the season went on, and they didn't have enough guys for the end of the season. And now this year, they drafted one, they signed one, and they're going to get Cole Holcomb back. Maybe it's crazy. Like they're going to have a plethora of riches this year. Like they would, man. I'm sure they're like, where was this last year when we needed just like one guy to stay healthy? So, yeah, I think it's great. Then we'll have two linebackers playing Mac who are better coverage linebackers than Patrick Queen. I mean, that's what we're going to end up with before the season's out. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Patrick Queen played a good game on Sunday, and the week before was very good. So yeah, I'm not really complaining about him, but it's a sort of like I think by this point in the season, you sort of understand what you get with him. The pluses and minuses. He's kind of an imperfect player at the position. So that's which is funny because Landon Roberts was supposed to be the guy that was flawed. Really good against the run, can't play the pass game. He's a liability. He won't see enough snaps because you can't have him on the field if the other team's going to throw. That really hasn't been the case with Roberts. Roberts has totally outplayed his reputation. And I am, for one, I'm always happy to see him on the field. I feel like he's a guy that plays linebacker the way you're supposed to play it. Like he is not. He'll never be Fred Warner running down in the middle of the field covering tight ends or wide receivers, but he's very solid in the position that he plays. Right. The other guys, they each have. Logan Wilson is fast as hell. Queen's for a Mac, he's a good run defender. It just for the scraping, running, sideline to sideline, does a good enough job with that. And Holcomb is kind of the last year I thought was the best all around linebacker that they've had in years in terms of being pretty good at run game, blitzing, and pass coverage. he doesn't really have a serious weakness. He's just, he's not necessarily great at any of it, but he's really good at all of it. So I do feel like that's exciting for him to come back. But yeah, it once makes you wonder, like you said, their rotation feels pretty set. It makes you wonder, like I feel like there'd almost have to be an injury for him to really be effective coming back. But aside from something like special teams and maybe goal line or something where, I don't know, where you have an extra linebacker or something like that.
Well, a good little note on Elandon Roberts. I can't remember if I saw it on Twitter earlier today or another place. Sorry, or X, if you really still get offended that I keep calling it Twitter over X. But he said that he would like to retire a Steeler. So I he's that type of guy, that Vince Williams type of guy, that we had for such a long time. It's like
100%.
that's the guy that I think he understands his role. He understands he's not going to get any more like big time paychecks out there. It sounds like he's found a home that he wants to stay at. So,
Yeah.
things kind of sound good there on him, coming back to. I don't he's not a free agent at the end of the year, don't get me wrong, and he's not getting paid over the moon either. I think he's getting paid like 2.5 million a year, if that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's good to know that a guy like that, who we all love and is really good at his role on this team, wants to be here for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. And I think he's playing in the right spot. He's playing for a team that really values downhill aggressive linebacker play more than some teams do, right? Like that's not really what a team like San Francisco is. I mean, they have always had really good linebackers, but they're looking for these sort of more mobile, more better in coverage guys. That's what they seem to value in their defense. But for Pittsburgh, like they love those guys that can lay the wood and fight through blocks and whatever. The stuff that he can do is really, really classic. And it's to the point where their issue for the last few years has been that, they're good at identifying guys who are like that. They have trouble identifying, the max, the guys to be that can play that are not a liability in the run game, but who can not just cover a running back, on a little delay out in the flat, but who can actually, cover somebody across or down the field. That's the thing that they never seem to like those kinds of linebackers. I think they're not aggressive enough or big enough for them in terms of what they like. That's probably probably a concession to the division. They think to themselves, well, we got the Browns and the Ravens. We can't put a second linebacker out there who can't stop the run, or else he'll just get plowed. So I get why they're after that, but I'm always when I'm doing my representing the Steelers in a mock draft in the offseason, I'm like forever trying to get them a coverage linebacker because, and now this year, for the first time going into next year, I think it might be a position that I I don't know who's Holcomb, I think, is done after this year's that contract, probably.
I believe so.
Yeah, if that's the case, especially then, even so, they're probably not going to add another linebacker next year. So I think it's for the first time in a really long time, I haven't thought to myself, well, yeah, linebackers in play for the draft. Like they should draft a linebacker. So yeah, I think it's they're in a they have a pretty good linebacker group, and they're certainly deep there. And getting Holcomb back, I'm never going to complain about that. But last year it would have been like, oh my God, thank God Cole Holcomb is healthy and coming back. And this year it's like, oh, that's a nice piece of icing on the cake.
Right. Yeah. Like who would have ever thought?
Yeah. It's suddenly
Since
become a position
you
of strength for them. It's crazy.
yeah, since you brought up the contract, I'm googling it very quickly just to make sure that
Yeah.
he is indeed a free agent. You know what? He is actually under contract for next year.
Got another year. Okay, well there
Yeah.
you go.
Now, there's no way they're going to pay him that or whatever. But
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I
not if
mean he's
he's not
due
starting, right? So
right. Well, I mean he's due 4 million in base. His signing's prorated at 1.6, but he has a $2 million roster bonus too. So I mean they're going to negotiate that if he wants to stick around regardless.
yeah.
Keep
I
him.
mean, if Patrick Queen wasn't a player that I think is like on the very short list of players that are really like Mike Tomlin's guys, to me it's like Cam Hayward, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, maybe you're getting there, Russ Wilson and Patrick Queen. Like those are really like feel like guys that Tomlin vibes with and likes having on the team just for other things that they bring besides what they do on the field. in addition to what they do on the field. If Patrick Queen, I didn't feel like was one of those players that he just kind of feels infatuated with, I could easily see him being the odd one out. If Holcomb's
Yeah.
comes back and he's healthy, your mixture of Holcomb, Roberts, and Wilson, I think, is better than what they have now. I think. Like there's many things to like about Patrick Queen, but in terms of the skill set of the three guys working together, feels like they would be better off with Holcomb in that spot than Patrick Queen. But that's not to say Patrick Queen's been bad, but Holcomb is better at things that Queen isn't that sort of fit that position better.
You know what would make this group really better off would be if they would put Saquon Barkley on the ground a lot this week.
There we go. We're talking about this week now. Excellent. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Nice segue there, right? Yeah,
I like that. Pretty good.
But they have quite the Herculean task. You're looking at who I think is the best running back in the league this year. I don't think it's particularly that close, just be to what he's been able to provide Philadelphia. But boy, do the Steelers have a Herculean task when it comes to corralling Saquon Barkley. I don't really need to say much about Saquon. He's tough nosed. He's probably the best athlete at running back in the entire league, as evidenced by the backwards hurdle from like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I think like everyone's jaw was just on the floor. They were like, did that really just happen? So like that game is putting up video game like numbers, making ridiculous moves. He is by far the toughest thing the Steelers have to look out for this week.
Yeah, it's funny. I think my position about the importance of running backs in the league is a little bit fluid. I think there was a period where they weren't really all that crucial a part of your offense. I feel like now, a guy like Barkley is a perfect example of just being on a team that has the threat to do a lot of different things offensively makes him suddenly a huge threat because you can't just, assume they're going to run him on first and second down and then try to make a play on third down. Like that to me was the thing with his time with the Giants. And I know, it appears that Brian Dable is safe there, but I felt like, that guy might be a good head coach, but I hate his approach. He has like that Neanderthal old school approach to what you do on offense when you're afraid. He plays sort of calls plays and uses his players kind of fearfully rather than figuring out ways to do what they do well. It's the worst possible situation for an offensive player. So from that standpoint, I felt like without the real threat of, a less predictable offense, so Barkley's career to this point, he's been the main focal point. They felt like they drafted him so high, they got to give him the ball all the time, and they're not really doing anything else on offense to open things up for him. And so the defense just pack in, and before you know it, he's getting beat to hell and injured. So what Philly has really done is just opened up opportunities for him because of the other stuff that they do. And I will say there is a little rumbling from their receivers about how they're focusing so much on using Barkley that they're not attacking in the pass game the way that they're capable of doing. And there was a little thing this week with AJ Brown and talking about his quarterback and alluding to the fact that, he felt like there were plays to be made that he was leaving on the field, et cetera. And I think that's a function of, as a Steelers fan, you know how it goes. If you focus so much on running the ball, you don't necessarily focus on getting guys open in the pass game. It's just more like, all right, we need to pass now, so we're going to run some pass plays, but you aren't working the whole game to try to get your guys open, right? So I feel Philly's slightly suffering from that, but as long as Barkley produces, it doesn't matter,
Absolutely. I mean, the Eagles are a team that they've got other weapons. They absolutely do. I was going to bring that up if you didn't there with the kind of rumblings from AJ Brown. He's not super happy with, the plays being left out there. They think they can be attacking down the field more, but they're settling, for the dump offs, the easy throws. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's been a tried and true success of, moving the chains, making sure you get the first down and all that. But like you said, they start to actually pass the ball down the field even more, Barkley could be even more effective because teams would stop coming up and playing the run and the underneath pass. So, but let's kind of move over to their receivers. AJ Brown, bona fide number one, very good, physical, can run deep too, not just across the middle or whatever. Devonta Smith, former Heisman Trophy winner, lightning in a bottle. I'm not quite as concerned with their receivers, just giving the state of how well the secondaries played. I will say not having Deshaun Elliott back there would change my opinion on that a little bit, just because he, would choose to help your, shade coverage to a degree. But their third and fourth receivers this year have not really done much. That's not that they're not talented.
It's not because they're not talented. It just
Right.
haven't really. It feels a little bit that way about the Steelers as well. Like they just, they have Mike Williams, but it's like they barely want to use him.
Mm-hmm.
They've almost not used Hayward at all. Like it's there are guys that have previously produced that have some kind of talent to do something who aren't being utilized for whatever reason. They're not getting the targets, right? And I feel like that's the thing with Philly. They're very deep at receiver. Like I think they're 3, 4, 5 are up there with anybody's 3, 4, 5. Maybe not San Francisco when the 49ers are totally healthy, but other than that, they hold that very well. You got what's his name? Jahan Dotson, which is a
Yep.
guy like I think Dotson and Johnny Wilson, for instance, would
Mm-hmm.
probably be starting for the Steelers at the number 2 wide receiver spot in a different kind of world,
Yeah,
They're
maybe.
arguably better than Van Jefferson at everything except for blocking. So, or maybe even Johnny Wilson, I think, had a reputation as being a really great blocker. So they're almost not getting any time. Anaya Smith, the guy that I think, at least before he broke his leg, was as electrifying a player as there was in college football.
Absolutely.
Is like their number 6, can't even see the field, has 5 catches or something this year, right?
Yeah. Well, and
So
then Britton Covey can
yeah, exactly. Well, he's their punt returner. At least he gets touches.
yeah, well, true, true.
But yeah, it's like I don't know. In general, I feel like it's very pleased about one thing, which is that we do seem to be adopting the Philadelphia Eagles methodology and drafting, like the way we're trying to build our team, I think is obviously taking a page from Philly. So you look at their roster, their offensive and defensive lines are loaded.
Mhm.
They have depth at every like they have just because they got good a couple of years ago and won the Super Bowl, then they like lost a bunch of people and they won the Super Bowl again, right? And then they're almost like rebuilding while they're still winning and they're whatever and one. So I feel like they are a very impressive. It's a very impressive operation, especially when you consider that they don't really have an elite quarterback. So they're the one team in the league with this fantastic record that doesn't even have what you might call a great quarterback. Like I think Jalen Hurts is good for what they do, but I think I would even say Jared Goff is better, and Goff has his issues. So that's amazing display of depth. I think their talent at other positions, like they've really mastered that part.
Yeah, well, let's kind of jump into that since you mentioned the trenches. Still one of the better offensive lines in the league. Even though what's his name, Jason Kelsey retired this offseason, Cam Jurgens has played pretty well there.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the bigger injury notes from the Eagles this week. Both starting left guard and right guard are both nicked. Did not practice today. Dickerson, excuse me, at left guard, and then
Something, Dick. Yeah.
yeah, and then Mekhi Becton at right guard. Um, and that's something I've watched the Eagles like more over this past month. Their interior, while good, is not infallible. That they are very handsy, which could play in very well.
Sure.
That they get a lot of penalties, and I think part of it is Becton's kind of playing out of position. He's been a tackle almost his entire career. Not
Yep.
the most mobile of guy either.
Not
So
a good tackle, but he's been a tackle. Yeah.
yeah, so he tends to reach and lunge and put himself in bad situations at times. Um, on the other hand, Landon Dickerson is absolutely fantastic when he's healthy. He was a big board favorite. He was a big favorite of ours, when we were still looking for a center a few years ago. He's been great for them at left guard. But I do think the Steelers have a chance to at least stalemate on the interior when it comes to our defensive line interior versus their offensive line interior. Just because, while Dickerson is good, Becton is definitely the weak spot on that line. And then Anthony Steen, Tyler Steen, rookie out of Alabama, who came in and kind of played relief for him. He looked decent, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot, to throw a rookie guard in there late in the year and be able to
Cameron Hayward,
yeah, against Cameron Hayward, Keanu Benton, Ogunjobi if he goes. So I think we have a chance to potentially match up well on their interior line. They have two of the best tackles in the games when it comes to Jordan Mailata at left tackle and Lane Johnson. Probably the best right tackle in the game with Lane Johnson. So our core group of edge rushers are going to have their hands full this week. That'll be interesting to see, how much help they give them, or if they try to, win the one-on-one game to free up other options for their offense. So anything else you want to talk about them offensively real quick before?
Just quickly on the injury notes. I'm reading here from the New Jersey Advance, which is that's the paper, one of the papers that covers the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
That Landon Dickerson, Mekhi Becton, AJ Brown, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, and edge rusher Josh Sweat were all listed as not practicing because they were given rest days. So chances are we're not going to be lucky enough to miss those guys.
Well, say that before I go on that big old rant.
I didn't know. I just looked up. I was trying to find out what Landon Dickerson's injury actually was. I know he got rolled up, I think, either last week or a couple weeks ago. But yeah, to me, this is like a key part of this game. Landon Dickerson, against. I mean, well, first of all, before we say anything else, it's very rare that the Steelers play a team that have offensive tackles who are arguably the equal of the Steelers edge rushers. Like that's a battle. It's not necessarily true that the Eagles are going to erase them or anything, but I mean that's a fair fight, right? Compared to some of the matchups we've seen this year, the teams don't have that, right? So that always offers an opportunity for the other team to, get a little bit more time against the Steelers secondary, because I feel like the secondary looks a hell of a lot better when the edge rushers and the interior linemen are putting pressure on the quarterback. That's true of everybody, but particularly for the Steelers, I think their defensive schemes and coverage are pretty much contingent on getting pass rush, and when they don't get pass rush, they get eaten alive, right?
Yeah, they've been that way since Dick LeBeau has been the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like if Landon Dickerson is healthy, that's a tough matchup for Cam Hayward. I mean, it's a tough matchup for Dickerson as well, but with the Eagles' desire to run the football, they got those big bodies on the offensive line, and they will just get you over and over again, and nothing. And I used that expression 3 times last week, so I want to make a point of making fun of myself. No, it's it isn't at all inconsequential that the Eagles not only go for it a lot on 4th down, but essentially if they get it down to like 4th and a yard or less, they're getting the first down. It's almost they've been stopped like once in 3 years doing it. So I think you've got to stop them, not just stop them, but you have to keep them in 3 downs from getting 9 yards, right? So it's like a bit of a different kind of a challenge. And I would say even if they get in 3rd and 2, they're getting the first down almost every time. Like it's not a team that you can just hope to get to like 3rd and 2 and get off the field like you can with a lot of teams.
Mm-hmm.
So that matchup that's rough. Like, especially if Ogunjobi doesn't go, but even if he does, been kind of invisible. That's been a sort of a weak spot, I think, for the Steelers. And Benton is a good penetrator. I'm not sure he's the 2-gap defender that I think you might need more against a team like the Eagles. So I expect to see the Eagles attempt to run the ball directly down the throat of the Steelers defense, and they're going to at least try that. Whether it'll work or not, I can't say. But I feel like that's something you're going to see in this game. And that they have the horses to do it. They have not only that offensive line matchups, but they have, Saquon Barkley, and they have Jalen Hurts, who himself is a good runner.
True. Defense definitely has its work cut out for itself this week. Player we didn't mention, Grant Calcaterra. He is a bona fide receiving tight end if there ever was one. While we've done a much better job on, those middle, kind of receiving threats against teams this year, a lot of that's been Deshaun Elliott's been helping out. It's been a big weakness in the past. Our linebacker group has been better there this year. I don't know if it's scheme. I haven't really paid too close of attention to it. But guys who have historically killed us in the past have not done that this year, but it's still, just one more guy that can put players in a compromising position. So just another name on offense to be on the lookout for. Defensively, they're still very good. I will say injuries have really hurt their depth this year on the D line. There's no Brandon Graham. He's on IR. One of their big offseason acquisitions, Bryce Huff, on IR, not there. So they don't have quite the depth that they've had going forward, but they do have, honestly, three of some of the best interior defensive linemen in the league.
I think the best group of three.
Anyway, without a doubt. In Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, the Alabama boys, and then, a big time favorite of a lot of ours on the Steeler Fury board, especially Milton Williams. Those guys are just terrors. They're all big time athletic guys. They're big, they're athletic. They challenge you in every asset of the game. And I'm not even talking about their edge players at this point. I'm just talking about three.
I mean,
they trot out there.
I love Nolan Smith I loved him more as an off-ball linebacker. I still feel like that's his position. But what Philly does is, because those three interior linemen are so good, instead of having a traditional, you have the three down linemen and edge rushers like we're accustomed to seeing with what the Steelers do. They just bring guys from everywhere. Like they send guys out of the television booth, on blitzes, and it's not like they often bring extra guys. They just bring the guys you're not expecting, and they don't do it with like a muddle huddle or anything else. It's just all their guys have, multiple capabilities, and they have a way of mixing it up and how they line up. I think you'll see guys move around a lot, and it isn't one of those games where you can say this is the matchup. As long as Dan Moore holds off, Nolan Smith or whatever, then they won't get any pass rush. I think that isn't how this works with them. They just throw bodies at you, and they've got, even without the depth that they once had at edge, they still have enough interior and off-ball rushers, blitzers, to make a big difference in the game. And I feel like that the problem with that is, if you're an offense, it's very hard to set up your blocking schemes for the run game if the other team doesn't play it straight. When the other team plays straight, you can say, all right, this is the middle linebacker, and therefore you get this guy, and you get this guy, and you get that guy. If different guys are coming in gaps that you're not expecting to be there, then you run the risk of guys shooting the gaps and ending up in your backfield before the plays even really got going. And think about a guy like Nolan Smith. If Nolan Smith is in the interior and you were pulling a guard or something, like, you're in trouble, because that guy's got quicks out the ass and is going to be on top of whatever you're running, and he'll chase anything down. So I feel like that's the challenge this week. And me personally, I would run hurry up. I'd pick up the pace of the offense so that the defense is forced to eventually go more vanilla on base downs, because they can't always dial something up quickly enough to match what you're doing. So hurry up, but running the football. If you take the time and you give them a chance to set up their D and give you different looks, like they seem very capable of being multiple on defense in a way that, like, a team like the Steelers, we don't see that much with them. They tend to, this is what we do, and we're really good at it. But Philly, I think, mixes it up a lot more.
Yeah, and to kind of round out your front seven, they're just athletic across the board. I mean, Josh Sweat, is the other defensive end, we didn't even talk about there. He's a very athletic guy, dating back to his Florida State days, very effective on the edge. And then, Charles Harris, another very athletic guy, never lived up to his draft type. I think he was like a second rounder to the Dolphins. But he's been a solid, backup defensive end. And then Jalix Hunt.
Oh yeah, Jalix Hunt. I
That's
didn't even
where I
know.
say I'm gonna
Yeah, I
let
forgot
you.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, like he was a very athletic player. I'm forgetting the school. Uh,
It's not SF, Houston Christian.
yeah, as Mary say, it
Used
was
to be
some
Houston
really
Baptist. I don't know which
small.
one it was when he was there. Yeah.
Yeah, some really small
But you see
Texas.
my point. You see my point. You just mentioned them. Nolan
Yeah,
Smith, Josh Sweat, Jalix Hunt, Charles Harris. These are guys that like are not traditional edge, not all of them are traditional edge rush types. They're just like athletes. And I feel like they're just gonna try to out athlete you in gaps and on the perimeter. And that's how they've been successful in the past.
well, and then the funny part of it is their best inside linebacker, Zach Bond, was an edge rusher at Wisconsin. When he came out, and he's made the transition to pretty good inside linebacker for them. Not to mention they have Nakobe Dean, who's a very good athlete at linebacker. Even Oren Burks. It's like I remember that guy when he was on the Packers. Very athletic guy. They drafted Trotter's son, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. He's there as well. So it's like they've got a good collection of
Like
front
I'm just
seven.
telling you, man, they're loaded,
Yeah, and
Like
then
they're
the
especially, these, athletes on defense and, I it's they're I'm envious, It's good
yeah.
as good as the Steelers have played. Um, they We didn't even talk about their secondary. I
Well, as
mean,
Barry said, we're going there next, my friend. So, I mean, talk about another group that's very athletic. Darius Slay, has always been one of the, faster, man corners in the league. And then, excuse me, they just drafted.
Quinion Mitchell's maybe been the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, as Barry say, rookie, first round pick Quinion. Mitchell's been great. They traded up to get Cooper DeJean, who everyone thought, oh, where do we play him? They're like, screw where do we play him? Let's get him on the field. He's been great playing that nickel spot for them. And then honestly, their safeties, have been playing much better this year too.
Yeah.
That was the other injury note or whatever, was that all of them were back at practice. They were all kind of nicked up after the last game, but Sidney Brown, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, they're all practiced in full
So
today.
So get this, their three of their four safeties got dinged and were either out of the game or unable to go at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And Tristan McCullum comes out of nowhere. His brother Zion is the cornerback, who was high draft pick and played well. But Tristan in college, was also really good. I think up until maybe they're like their senior year, they had both been equal prospects. They're identical twins, and they both were impact players. But Tristan got a little lost in the shovel with some injuries towards the end of his college career, and so he might have even been, he was a free agent, I think. But he stepped in, and suddenly he's making all these plays, and people are like, who's that guy? So this is the thing about depth is, if you lose guys mid game and you bring in somebody that you've never really trusted to do anything. I think it's a fabulous tribute to the way their organization works. They got their flaws, and they have things that that will probably keep them from being a championship team unless things fall right for them. I think they're in a similar boat to the Steelers that way. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if things sort of fell right and the matchups fell right, and maybe some quarterback got injured, God forbid, then maybe they could just use their overall team quality to like continue to win in the postseason. But they're uh they're a tough out just because they're a weird team to play. And if you can't figure out a way to match up against the unique athletes on defense and the relentless offensive line play, yeah, you're gonna have a tough time.
Absolutely. Well, the Steelers aren't the only team with a tough game around. Oh, actually, really quickly, we don't have to stay on it for very long because there wasn't much of an emphasis this week. But did you get a chance to watch Hard Knocks from this past day?
I've only watched the first 15 minutes, and it started
Okay.
with James Winston. I was like, guess what?
Yeah.
You knew that was coming.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We won't bring it up then. I don't want to spoil any of it for you, but
No,
just
I think I'm sorry I went on Corey's boat. I started watching it from the time that you said we're gonna go in 20 minutes, so I watched like the first part of it. That's it.
Mhm.
But
But
still,
there's some good Joey Porter Jr. stuff on there this week. Just kind of some things we've brought up before. I won't say anything since you haven't watched it, but
By the
just
way,
good,
my
good story.
prediction for Hard Knocks as it goes on is that if Mike Tomlin watches any of it, he's going to stop using the word man. He's going to look at himself and be like, "Oh man, I use the word man a lot, man."
Yeah,
And you know, knowing him, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, no, I can't, man, I can't do that, man." No,
yeah.
it's funny. It's like it's the punctuation to every sentence, you know. So at some point, you're like, okay, you're supposed to be this erudite head coach, and he does a good job of not doing that as much when he's making a speech. But yeah,
But
I,
yeah, if you haven't gotten a chance to watch Hard Knocks yet, this week it's another good one. There's a good portion of it devoted to the Steelers Brown matchup. Baltimore's on bye, so
yeah, that made it
it got
less.
a little bit more airtime this week, probably. Don't know about moving forward, but anyway, go check that out on HBO if you haven't. Always another fun little insight when you get just a little bit extra covers that you weren't expecting. Uh,
Absolutely.
right. But so getting into there are some other tough matchups this week. That there were quite a few. I had trouble kind of paring them down. Honestly, I wrote 7 games up there. You know, we don't.
Well, I have a request.
Okay.
Let's make sure that whatever you choose, make sure we pick the games that are important for the Steelers' playoff chances.
Okay.
So the most important ones are Miami, Indianapolis, and Houston. Those are really the three teams I
They're
think.
all up there.
Yeah.
They're all up there. So let's
Oh, no, I
start.
said I said Miami. Well, I said Miami. I'm sorry. I meant Miami, Indianapolis, and Houston. What did I say for number two there? Whatever.
You mentioned 3 of the teams that play each other.
Yeah,
So
right on. So, but yeah, the Colts, basically the Steelers, just for the record, so that it's clear why I'm saying that. The Steelers' only chance of not making it into the playoffs would be to lose at least the next 3 games, and for Miami or Indianapolis to win their way into a tie with the Steelers, right? Especially Indianapolis having that tiebreaker of the head-to-head.
yeah, yeah.
So these are important for the Steelers locking it up. You know, a Steelers win and or a Miami and Indianapolis loss, I think clinches it for them. But it's it makes it almost impossible for them to get
Yeah,
out.
well, let's start out with Indy. You know, that's where I'm at anyway. So the Colts have to travel out to Denver. Denver's favored by 4. It's gonna be a tough matchup. I'll start off with it. I know Indianapolis has been playing better, but I feel like Denver is just playing better football altogether. Bo Nix, honestly, has been way better than I thought he would be. I don't know if that's just, part of Sean Payton not putting him in a lot of bad situations. I'll be honest, I have not watched a lot of Denver football this year. It's been here and there. But when I have, Nix has been playing well. They've been moving the ball well on offense. The defense it's not great, but it's not bad either. It's still a very hard-nosed unit. So I like Denver here. I know Anthony Richardson's back. The Colts are playing better. But boy, I will tell you one thing. If there's one thing that unfortunately translates for the Colts, they drop a ton of catchable balls. They are just the team that is more prone to make the mistakes this week, and I think that's going to end up doing it. I like Denver to win the cover.
Yeah, a couple things about Denver, having lived there. It's
Oh yeah.
very dry because of the altitude, and I would say if you have a propensity to drop the ball in the dome, that Denver is not necessarily your friend. Because I feel like as somebody who has caught footballs for fun, every weekend for like 30 years plus, that when it's the easiest time to catch the ball is when there's just the ball has a little tackiness to it from that moisture. And it's just like you couldn't, it makes it hard to drop a professionally waxed football. Like it's just that, right? So there's that. There is a big injury for Denver. I guess Riley Moss might not play in this game.
Ooh, okay.
And if that's, I mean, I know it's 50-50. So I'm going to put it this way. If Moss doesn't play, I don't know if did you remember seeing Levi Wallace a couple of weeks ago when he played and was getting destroyed? I kind of feel like that's a big loss if they don't have Riley Moss. If they have him, I would say that Denver wins what will amount to a playoff game, really, I think, for the Colts especially. And it's also huge for Denver. If Indy ends up with the tiebreaker against Denver and Pittsburgh, especially with Pittsburgh scheduled the next 3 weeks, it feels like this is a huge game for them. And I kind of feel like Indy is going to win a very close ball game. I don't disagree with anything you said. Denver's playing really well. Indy is just up and down, hot and cold. But it feels like I don't know if their season is on the line, but I kind of feel like this is a huge, huge opportunity for them to get back in the race.
Well,
Bo Nix, in red zone play and in sort of you have to make a quick decision play has always been really good. I thought that was the best part of his tape, and they have now figured out a way to unlock that compared to when we saw him at the beginning of the year. Because I feel like when he played those first 2 weeks of the season, he was just like sort of in
what?
awe of the league.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He looked pretty scaredy cat, but I think he's been really great down the stretch here for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you kind of said the thing for Indianapolis, every week's their season at this point. That they have to win out to get in. Dolphins are in that same boat. We'll talk about them here in their game with Houston next. But I mean, we wouldn't be talking about the Colts if they wouldn't have gone for two against New England because they scored late to make that a 23-24 ball game, and Sykens said, nope, we're going for it. Ran Richardson up the middle. If he doesn't get it, we're not even talking about the Colts. So I mean, you're completely right. Indy's battling for their playoff life every single week. So
And I think teams respond to that, man. They like it that their coach believes in them. So once is aggressive in trying to win, I always feel like that bodes well.
And then Miami, you mentioned them. They're another team fighting for their playoff life. They have to travel to Houston this week. Houston is a 3-point favorite. I'll let you start off on this one.
Houston has been sort of like I won't say sleepwalking through the season, but they much like the Chiefs, everybody's on the Chiefs for just eking out wins and not really looking dominant, in any particular way. But Houston is really sort of living life dangerously right now. Like Indianapolis has not only got a shot to make the playoffs as a wild card, they might have a better shot winning the division if Houston doesn't pick it up. Houston's got relatively tough schedule. Um, I I kind of think Miami found a little something last week. I'm going to go against probably massive public opinion. I'm guessing this is a game where like 75% of the public is going to pick Houston to win, but I kind of feel like the Dolphins aren't dead yet. Maybe they will be dead soon, but they're not dead yet. So I'll take the Dolphins.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've watched some Dolphins football. They have definitely found a way to get the offense clicking again, and the defense has done, just enough to keep them in games. It hasn't been great, it hasn't been pretty, but they're still in ball games. This is a tough one for me too because it's like Houston can come out and play well at any given point.
Yep. Houston's defense, going into the season, I would have said that was like a top three defense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it looks the whole thing just looks like the magic of last year. They haven't really found it yet, and they keep thinking, "Oh, we're gonna have the magic from last year." But it's a good lesson for a relatively new head coach and for a second year quarterback and so on. That last year was last year. You have to each year is different, each team is different, and maybe you got to it's a little easier when no one expects you to win to be better than expected than it is to live up to expectations. Everyone who has gone through that understands that it's way harder to do.
Yeah, and as a result, I'm going to, kind of go with you. Miami has found a way to win a few. I think they find a way to eke out a tough one. I will say this: if Nico Collins has a big game, though, Houston's going to win that. If they can limit Nico Collins, they're going to find a way to win that ball game. Let's keep it. Well, I didn't really have any of their AFC matchups up there, but those were the kind of the three big names that Pittsburgh had to be on the lookout for as far as tiebreakers and last place. But go ahead.
By the way, the reason I mentioned Houston is I think Houston losing might actually benefit the Steelers. If Indy were to win the division, I think the Steelers have a better tiebreaker situation against Houston. That's all I was saying. That's why I was like paying attention to what Houston does as well, because if both Houston and Indianapolis keep winning, it's worse for the Steelers. It's just like their only scenario where they could get either knocked out or knocked down to like a very undesirable playoff spot would be Houston, Indianapolis, and probably Miami continue to win that's not good.
Gotcha. Let's talk about some West Coast teams. Rams pulled off an unlikely victory against Buffalo this past week, kind of stunned the
Hell of
world.
a game.
Yeah, it was a fantastic game. They have a NFC West matchup. They have to go to San Fran, Santa Clara to play the 49ers, who made me look really bad last week. I said the Bears might have a shot. I should have realized that the Bears are just the Bears of this.
Just
The Bears.
when you're about to pick the Bears or the Cowboys, just realize what you're saying, and you're like, just
Oh,
stop.
yeah, to throw that one in there too. Okay.
Yeah, friends, don't let friends pick the Bears or Cowboys. That's really what
I was
I'm on.
feeling feisty this past week. I don't know why, but I'm less feisty this week. Let's put it that way. But San Fran at home, favored by 3. I like the Rams. I think they just have a little bit too much offensively for the 49ers to deal with it all. Even though the San Fran definitely kind of woke up this past week. Isaac Guerrero had a big time game running the ball for San Fran. I think the Rams are in this do or die situation right now too. They realize it if they don't win the division, it's going to be just as tight of a race to figure out who's going to be that wild card slot, because the NFC North is going to put 3 teams in this year with Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota. So there's only one wild card spot really up for grabs anymore, folks. So if they win, they're obviously in a lot better situation. I think they'd be tied with Seattle for the division lead, and then on tiebreaker, I think over San Fran, or I think they've split if the Rams were to win this week. But I think the Rams need it, but they played a lot better than I thought they were going to against Buffalo, and I just think that they're going to start getting on a roll, very much like they did last year. They were kind of my dark horse team last year as the playoff race kind of came down the stretch. It was like they started getting healthy again. The offense started clicking. I think that's where they are now. I like the Rams to go steal one in San Fran.
Yeah, the Buffalo, their flaw, they got a lot of great things. Their flaw is their pass defense has really not been very good at all. And the Rams, just you got Sean McVay and you got a quarterback that can sling it and you got those receivers. They're so good at that, right? San Francisco is a different story. San Francisco's pass defense might arguably be the best part of their team on either side of the ball. So I think it's a bit tougher ask. And like we were saying about Indianapolis earlier, this is really do or die for 49ers. And
Yeah,
they're a good team that knows how to win. And with their backs against the wall, to me, they're going to be a little bit like the Steelers were in the stretch run last year. It's like, they're a solid team. So to win against them, you have to not make mistakes and you have to be at least as good as them in key parts of the game. So I feel like it's a key matchup. I'm going to go with the home team in the division and pick the 49ers. I felt like the 49ers, like, Guerrero, I feel like is a sort of a perfect fit for what they like to do because he's not like Jordan Mason's a solid football player and a nice change of pace to McCaffrey. But the thing about Guerrero that you get is you get chunk plays and you get a chance for him to take it to the house every time he touches the football. So that fits nicely with what they want to try to do. And as I said to a 49ers friend this week, he was lamenting the receivers that they're missing. And I was like, man, you got, Kittle, Jawan Jennings, and Debo. It's like there are a lot of teams in the NFL that don't have 3 guys that good. So I think it's you have an excellent quarterback and maybe the best offensive mind going right now. I feel like the Rams defense not so good. So this is probably a game where the Rams might play well on offense, but I still feel like they're probably going to have a tougher opponent against them on the field compared to what the 49ers will have.
So what I'm hearing is take the over.
I don't know. Because it sometimes it doesn't work out like that because
Sure.
teams play more carefully on defense when the other team they know has the weapons.
Mhm.
But I do feel like, those linebackers for San Francisco and their strong safety are like there are like erasers in the middle. So that really changes. You could, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp can still have and their tight end can still have action, but not the same kind of like free run that they usually get. So
Yeah.
it's a much tougher game for them. And I think the Rams in particular really like to use the crossing routes in the middle of the field more than most teams do. So that to me, that's a San Francisco sort of built to beat that.
Gotcha. Let's keep it in the NFC West very quickly. Green Bay heading to Seattle, favored by 3. I picked Arizona last week over Seattle. It didn't look good. It's going to be another, very, very close tussle. I like Green Bay to win, or I like Seattle. Seattle's a tough place to play. Yeah, really, this could be a coin flip type of game for me with the way both teams are playing. Jordan Love has not played the best recently, and I think that's a reason that's going to hold him back this game. I like Seattle to eke out a close one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's a hard team to read. I feel like whenever I start to get like, all right, like they're better than I thought, and I think part of that is Geno Smith is a lot of things, and he's a real like he's a tough guy, and he's a guy that I think is a good teammate and a guy, a solid guy to have on your team. Like he's there's I can't say anything bad about him, but he isn't necessarily consistently great. So I feel like they go as he goes sort of. Um, but on the other hand, I don't think Green Bay was really humbled, I think, against Detroit, and that was a short week, right, for them.
Yeah, that was a Thursday
So
night game.
I know I feel like this is a very tough game to pick because the Packers get, some extra time, but yet they're going to Seattle, which is, traditionally a very hard place to play. But, do I see the Seahawks having the same record as Green Bay? Like if I didn't know anything about their record except for just having, seen them play a few times this year and, know the games that they won or lost, I don't think of those teams as being even, but they would be if Seattle wins this game, right? So
I think so.
I'm sort of inclined to say I think the Packers are better,
Yeah.
and with the extra time, we'll come back off the mini bye and eke out a victory in Seattle.
All right, let's throw it to one more because it's probably the NFL's game of the week. What very well could look like a future Super Bowl matchup. Buffalo heads to Detroit. Boy, Detroit at home favored by 2.5. If there was ever a game like I didn't want to have to pick, it'd be this one because both these teams are flat out phenomenal. They really are. And the funny thing is, it's because both offenses are very good and both defenses are good to okay. Neither defense is elite by any means. I would have leaned that way with Detroit if Aiden Hutchinson would have been there because they would have had one really stud pass rusher. Where I don't really feel like the Bills have that this year. It's like they've got a good sum of parts, but no one that really sticks out. And I think that ends up being the difference. I think Detroit finds a way to move the ball just one extra time. It'll be a Dan Campbell. Did you really go for it on 4th and 3 at your own 40 type bullshit that they pick up? And that'll be the difference in the game. So I like Detroit to win and cover, but just barely. Like this is your heavyweight, knockout fight. It won't be no Jake Paul versus Tyson or anything like that. No one's pulling punches this week. So if anything, they'll be biting kneecaps and ears. So, Will, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So to me, the big part of this game is I think Buffalo is a team that is almost definitely going to get an early lead in the game. That's their formula. Their formula is they get an early lead, and then they figure out a way to keep you keep trying to catch up to them, and eventually you run out of bullets. That's how they're winning right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jared Goff, and I can't remember if this is in his career or just in his time in Detroit, but basically when the game's been tied or he has the lead, has an elite passer rating, touchdown ratio to interceptions and wins. When he's behind, he is totally pedestrian. So it's a function of, he's a perfect fit for that offense to run it and play from the front and be quarterback a better team and consistently play against other teams so you till you get to the victory line. But he's not the quarterback you necessarily want to have in a game where they're trailing. And I feel like this is a game where they'll be trailing. I liked Detroit a lot, and I think on a given week, they're the best team in the NFL. Buffalo, I think their defense was embarrassed last week, and I expect the storyline to be that their defense, plays a great game against, like, you're never going to hold Detroit's offense down completely. I feel like they're just so I love what Ben Johnson is doing, and I love their approach, to the whole thing, and the fact that they get extra possessions by, going for it when it's smart or even when it's not smart sometimes. So I kind of feel like that's a recipe for a game where, just a little bit better Buffalo defense than they played last week, and playing with the lead will be the key for them. But if Buffalo can get a lead, I think they're going to win, and I expect them to get at least the lead early in the game. So I think Buffalo, it might be a really exciting game. Amazing, run of games for Buffalo. Like, Jesus, like to have that shootout last week and then just go right back into it and play Detroit is rough. Sort of how we're going to feel about the Steelers by the time they get to Christmas.
Very safe, for real. Well, let's take it there. Our 5-star matchup of the week. Your Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. I'll let you start on this one.
Sure. I think the Steelers are a pretty good football team. Like, I might even think they have the potential to be a very good football team, right? But even a very good football team, I think, could be real trouble these next 3 games for a variety of reasons. This one, not only without George Pickens, like, it's one thing for a week to go without George Pickens and figure out a way against a team that's barely hanging on, who isn't playing great defense, to like figure out a way to score points and beat them, right? Kick them when they're down. It's another thing to like have to consistently play without George Pickens. So I don't think that part of it is going to be so pretty. And I just feel like, offensive and defensive lines, the Steelers O-line and D-line have played pretty good football this year, but they're going to be it's going to be a tough ask for them to play as well this week. So for a team that really likes to run the ball a lot and whose quarterback looks a hell of a lot better when he's protected, in terms of the Steelers, I don't think they quite get that margin this week.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't so much about playing in Philadelphia. It's just playing a really good team on the road who has, offensive and defensive lines that can match, if not out execute yours. So I like Philly in this game. I don't think it'll be super high scoring, but I also don't think it'll be very close. I think this is a 24-13 Philadelphia Eagles win. And it doesn't mean I think the Steelers are bad, because I think the Steelers are really good. I just feel like it's not necessarily the best week for them. And they know that, the following Saturday, it's only going to be 6 days away by the time this game finishes, is, the game for the season. So I feel like that's, they're not that they're going to not try to win this game, but I feel like, by the time it gets to the fourth quarter of this game, they're going to be thinking, all right, well, we need to get out of here healthy and get to Saturday.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, Will, what was your score there?
I think I said 24-13.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. For some reason, like, I don't know, my own hearing went out for a second, but it was like, I heard it, but it was like,
maybe that my voice went out for a minute, because sometimes, and then I'm talking.
Yeah, exactly like that.
By the way, if you're ever like on stage and there's a sound engineer who's checking the mic, that's the best thing you can possibly do. Pretend that your voice is, and yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, I'm kind of with you. I think this is the buzzsaw that the Steelers, without George Pickens, I just don't see them getting through with a win. I think it'll kind of be ugly too, honestly. Man, I just think Philadelphia flies around the field on defense, and our offense does not do that without George. Like, Calvin Austin and Jalen Warren are the only 2 other players like on the Steelers offensively that I think can actually run faster than other defenders. And the Eagles defense, I think, is going to be ready for that. I think Cooper DeJean, we're going to be calling his name is going to be getting called a lot. And then, like you said, our offensive line has to play perfect for the entire game. This will be a slugfest. I think it's going to be like 27-9. Honestly, I'm really not sure we can score a touchdown against this defense. It'll take like a special teams gaffe, which they are pretty solid at as well for us to get in like plus field position and for us to take advantage.
Yeah.
I think Pat Fryermuth will be a big option this week, or at least we try to make him more of an option if Pickens isn't there. But even then, I just don't see it. So I think 27-9, and I think if they're going to get up early, Pittsburgh's going to be in this we have to catch up mode, and this team's never been built for that without Roethlisberger. It doesn't matter who we've tried after him. So I think it's Eagles 27-9 in a game that, like you said, by the end of the third quarter, I'm going to be thinking, yep, this one's over. Let's just get out of here unscathed and get ready for. I think it's Baltimore.
I mean, I'll say this, Jeremy. I don't think it's a referendum on are the Steelers capable of making a playoff.
Sure.
I just because it's not, it may not be that, that we're predicting it this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I don't think that they could figure out a way to pull it together and get hot. Like that's it's none of that. It just doesn't really favor them with the two games they have after that, which have to be at the forefront of their minds. Is no matter what kind of psychology you can be, like one game at a time, one game at a time, one game at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like you're going on the road to a hostile environment in a game from the other conference for a team that you don't know that way, and you haven't developed a hatred for them, in the same sort of way, right? So it would be a stunner, I think, for the Steelers to come out of there with a win. It's not impossible. They have tools, and they have they have great defense. Their defense has been setting them up for points or scoring points, so you can't discount the possibility that the defense holds Philadelphia's offense down and keeps it a 15-13 game or something. So it's not impossible. I'm not saying they're going to get blown out. They have no chance. Like that's the way I felt about playing San Francisco with Kenny Pickett and the state of the Steelers offense to start last year. I don't feel like that, but it just doesn't feel like a matchup that favors the Steelers right now.
No, I agree. Well, thank you all for joining us here for another episode at the SteelersFury.com podcast. It's unfortunate that we couldn't give you more of a hopeful look heading into.
We're often wrong, just for the record.
Yeah, that's true. I said it. If we can, threaten the interior of their offensive line, and make them earn every yard, and our defense is number one in the league in turnovers. Like if we can maybe force a turnover or two, and we're going to need Darnell Washington to block his ass off this week. If there's any success, it's going to come because Darnell can wash down a defensive end and chip a linebacker. So,
but I think it's like if they're going to win, that they need to attack the edges running the football, and they need to attack it with speed. Like I would much rather see, even Cordero Patterson compared to Najee Harris on the edge against a team like Philly, because their guys got so much speed that they're gonna by the time Harris gets to the line, it's gonna have an army of defenders there. So to me, I want to see Darnell Washington blocking smaller linebackers into oblivion and being used in the pass game. I feel like that's use the two-way game of the tight ends, both Darnell Washington and Freiermuth, and attack that edge with something other than a slow developing run play. I could see there being a possibility in that on offense for the Steelers. But yeah, if you just try to straight up do what they've been doing and run, trap plays and slow developing pitches to the outside with Najee Harris, I don't see that, and go ball, 50-50 balls on the sideline. If that's the offense that comes out in this game and they don't put the thought into trying to specifically beat Philly, then yeah, it's going to be ugly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just pulled off one of those fake end movie scene credit there thing.
You did.
All right, to end it, and we were like, no, we've got more for you.
Hey, well, because I think both of us feel the same way. You don't want to seem like so pessimistic that nobody ever wants to watch this show.
Right.
So I'm just trying to be a realist, because it also doesn't do any good to just be like, oh yeah, man, we're winning the Super Bowl. Watch us go into Philly and kick their ass.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Well, this time, thank you all for joining the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman, joined by Will Masisak, Thomas Bradshaw, have been on the message boards. Hopefully, Pittsburgh can go in there and, try to end a 50-year losing streak, which is crazy when you think about it. 50 years we haven't won there, essentially. So
something to talk about.
Yeah.
Always something to talk about on the show.
Yeah. Well, here we go, Steelers. Try to steal one in Philly.
Here we go, kids.